So thanks everyone for joining us. We are beyond excited to be here this morning talking to you about Alberta's rat control program, about the new Rat on Rats campaign that we will debut with you here today. We're really excited to share all of that information. So a couple of housekeeping items as people trickle in. This is set up as a webinar, so we're going to ask that folks put any technical questions or issues in the Q&A, in the chat box. And then there's also a different area where we'd like for you to type in your questions for all of our speakers. So on my version of Zoom, when I move my cursor, a menu pops up, and on the right-hand side, there's a little more button, and then it brings up another menu where I can pull up a Q&A box. So if you would like to if you have questions for our speakers, please put your questions in the Q&A box. If you have technical issues, please put those in the chat, and we will try to address those for you right away. And we will hold all the questions to the very end of our forum today. So please put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll address those at the end. We are recording this session, and if you have to pop out, don't worry. We're going to record this and we'll post it to our website, and we'll try to send a link to the recording to all of the registrants that registered for the forum this morning as well. So my name is Megan Evans, and I am the Executive Director at the Alberta Invasive Species Council. And we are really thrilled to be presenting this forum for you today. So what we've got, I'm going to pull up our agenda. And here we go. So this is what we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to go through a couple of quick announcements. Then we have an announcement from the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. And then we're going to go on with our invited speakers to talk about the history of Alberta's rat control program, the current status of that program, and talk about what it's like dealing with the rat control program as a boots on the ground type of an experience. And also just a perspective from an individual who lives in a place where there are rats, which is definitely the norm. Alberta is definitely the exception when it comes to not having rats, as you all know. And then at the very end, we will pull up the questions, and we will answer all the questions from attendees. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to present a message from the Honorable R.J. Sigurdsson, the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, who's going to share a message about today's forum with everybody.
R.J. Sigurdsson, Alberta's Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. For more than 70 years, Alberta has been the world's largest rat-free region. It's a legacy we're very proud of, and one so many folks work hard to keep up. And we couldn't do it without the help of everyday Albertans. Rats are an invasive species that cause millions in damage and threaten human health. By reporting rats, you can help keep this menace out of our province, which is why we've partnered with the federal government to fund Rat on Rats, a campaign run by the Alberta Invasive Species Council that encourages Albertans to report rats and rat signs. In the coming weeks and months, you'll see billboards, posters, and more. Keep Alberta rat-free, Rat on Rats. Call 310-FARM or email rats@gov.ab.ca.
So some of you might be familiar with this. So this is, of course, this Wheel on Pigs campaign that we brought to Alberta a few years back. And it was kind of in those early days when we had conversations with Karen Wickerson, who you're going to hear from in a moment. She's the provincial rat and pest specialist. And Karen was talking to us about how she would really like to see something like this for rats in Alberta. And she'll share with you kind of the need for this new type of outreach and the need for continued vigilance and diligence to keep rats out of Alberta. So early days, we were really excited about this, and we decided to start kind of talking and brainstorming about ideas then. And we're excited to bring to you the new campaign, which of course was based on a lot of history. We had a lot of there was a lot of extension and outreach done to create awareness of Alberta's rat control program. It's been around for a long, long time. I don't want to, give any spoilers and take away from our presenters today, but there's been a lot of history behind this program. and we wanted to breathe some new life into some of this messaging, and really kind of really work on creating that awareness. So with that in mind, we have developed the Rat on Rats campaign, working very closely with Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation. We've got these two main logos with two different taglines that are kind of all interchangeable. So the Rat on Rats is the main call to action. If you see something, say something. We want to keep Alberta rat free. And we also encourage everyone in a kind of a secondary call to action to join the Rat Patrol. So we wanted to keep the retro vibe of the old posters, of the old messaging alive, and we tried to do that in different ways. We also wanted a rat that looked a little bit mischievous, like it was up to no good, and perhaps trying not to get caught. And so that was our goal with this rat looking over his shoulder. It was important to have that call to action. We know people respond really well to that, and we have a couple of these embedded within the messaging. And it was also important that people knew that this was an Alberta specific campaign, and that Alberta is unique in having this very specific rat-free status. So those are all key components that we wanted to incorporate into the campaign. And then I also want to take a moment and recognize the team that worked to develop this, which includes Paige Kazmarski, who works with me here at the Alberta Invasive Species Council, Karen Wickerson, who is our rat and pest specialist of Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation, and Garrett Gerlitz, who works with Karen on the rat control program as well. So there's been a lot of time and energy put into this, and a lot of really great feedback from everybody. So I won't spend a ton of time on this, but we've got these two different logos. We've got various colors we can use, and the two interchangeable slogans, which are Keep Alberta Rat Free and Join the Rat Patrol. This is kind of the square one without the province, and this is the other option that we have as well. So we've got different colors and kind of scenarios that we can use based on, different types of media or colors, backgrounds, and things like that. So we had our graphic designer also come up with a number of scenarios, which is really intended to drive home the point that these rats are really destructive and damaging. We're trying to really showcase that. And they're problematic all over the place. They're problematic in agricultural areas. They're also problematic in urban areas as well. And there is perhaps with more and more movement of people, we know that we have more and more movement of everything, and that there's all kinds of invasive species that hitchhike rides on vehicles, on your shoelaces, on car tires, you name it. And so this is another vector, and urban areas are also at risk from introductions of rats as well. So our next steps with this, there was a press release that went out today. Billboards are up this week. We're developing marketing materials. We've got presentations lined up. We have another event coming up on February the 7th. I'm not sure that we have the registration details for that live yet, but please mark your calendars, specifically if you are a certified pesticide applicator. This is going to be really tailored toward structural applicators, so the structural class of applicators, and that would be applicators that would be, basically who would be able to do rat control in an urban environment. So this is a virtual workshop. It's free to attend. It's called Pests in the City, and we'll have the details on that coming to you soon. We're also going to have a presentation at our conference. That's the Alberta Invasive Species Council's conference on March 5th and 6th in Olds. And registration for that event will open on January 1st. So stay tuned for more information. And hopefully we'll catch you around at other presentations where we're talking about this campaign as well. And then finally, the next steps, we've got a call to action to everyone here today as well, and that is to help us promote the campaign. So not only are we working on a communications toolkit, so if you're a municipality or an NGO or a land manager and you do some level of extension or outreach, or you have a website, let us know, get in touch with us, and we'll give you the images and kind of the brand guidelines, and you can post that information on your website, in your newsletters, on your social media, and please help us get the word out. And if you're an individual and you're not a part of an organization, that's okay too. Help us by spreading the word. Tell one person something that you learned here today, and or share things on social media, forward newsletter articles that you might receive from us, etc. So please please help us in getting that word out. That's a really critical part. We've done the development, now we've got to execute. We have to execute it well, and we're relying on all of you to help us with that today. And fortunately, we have an incredible lineup of speakers who are going to go through cradle to grave, from the history of this program all the way up to current day status and program current program activities, as well as hearing from somebody who lives with rats all the time, and that kind of cautionary tale of what we don't want to happen. So that's how we'll end things off today. So I'm going to work on getting that audio sorted out on that video. I'm so sorry that happened. And what I'm going to do now is hand things over to, I will stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hand things right over to Ted Stenson, who is a documentary filmmaker based in the Calgary area. And Ted is a writer and filmmaker based in Calgary, and his first feature film was called Events Transpiring Before, During, and After a High School Basketball Game. It premiered at the Vancouver International Film Festival in 2020 and went on to play at over 15 festivals. Living Without Menace, his documentary about the Alberta Rat Control Program, was released on CBC in 2022. And we were just discussing how to access that documentary because it might be of interest to folks that are here today. And we understand that is on CBC Gem. It is free to watch, but that you do need to sign up for a CBC account. We can help you guys all find that documentary today as well. So Ted, the floor is yours. I'll invite you to share your screen and turn your audio on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so like Megan said, I'm a filmmaker, and I made a documentary about the Alberta Rat Control Program, which came out in 2022. Yeah, just to quickly sort of explain how I got interested in it. I have a sister who works at a community association in Calgary, and I guess at some point the rat control program visited them and gave them a bunch of keychains that had a rat on it and said, if you see a rat, call 310 rats. She gave this to me, and yeah, I mean, I'd heard of the rat control program, but I think for like lots of people, it was sort of had a more mythical urban legend kind of status. So this was the first thing that really kind of keyed me into the fact that like it is still an active program. It's real. It's not just an urban legend. And then, seeing some of these iconic posters from the early days of the program in the 50s, seeing that is what really got me into it. And, like many people, I just kind of got fascinated by this idea that Alberta had this singular status. And, I just got deeper into it and, was able to make a film about it. Which, yeah, necessitated a lot of research. And I'm still actually doing some research for a potential book project. So if anybody has any, stories about the rat control program or have relatives that worked on the program or any connections, I'd love to hear from you. And I'll put my email address in the chat. And yeah, I'd love to, I really just want to collect as much material as possible and, hopefully kind of archive that in one place. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. One other thing I just wanted to mention, just wanted to thank Karen Wickerson for sure. Sorry, I don't know if you guys are seeing my screen here.
We do see your screen and your thumbnails as well, Ted.
Okay, sorry, I think I full screened the wrong thing. 1 second. Okay, share this one. Okay, is that working?
That looks perfect.
Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to first off thank Karen Wickerson for all of her help and cooperation. She's been great as I've done various research on the program. And also Phil Merrill, who passed away recently. He was the previous head of the program, and I was fortunate enough to get to work with him a lot, and he was a great resource as well. And also my research partner, Francis Riley, who's a historian, and George Colpitts from the University of Calgary. They both helped a ton in terms of, just giving me background on this program and helping me with research and contributing to that. So they've all contributed a lot to, my own knowledge and where a lot of these materials come from. I'm sure this will get touched on more in depth later, but just, very briefly. So the Norway rat, which is kind of the main invasive species or the main species of rat that we're worried about in Alberta. It originated in Asia and is thought to have migrated along trade routes like the Silk Road into Europe and then through colonization into the Americas. So the Norway rat probably would have arrived to the east coast of Canada somewhere in the late 18th century. So the kind of amazing thing, and I think it's one of the biggest factors probably about why Alberta has managed to stay rat-free and why we've been able to do this, is that it took rats an incredibly long time to migrate across Canada over land. So it wasn't until 1929 that rats actually reached the eastern border of Saskatchewan, and then it took another 21 years until rats reached the Alberta border. So there had been reports of rats earlier than this, probably arriving, on train or car, or traveling with people as they settled across the continent, but they weren't able to actually entrench themselves over land until 1950. So probably, Alberta is the last inhabited part of the world that rats really, migrated to, which, by that point, Alberta was in a much better position than really anywhere else to kind of do something serious about it. So yeah, on July 22nd, 1950, Calgary Herald reported the discovery of a colony of rats in Alsace, which is a small town several kilometers east of the Alberta-Saskatchewan border. This was really like the first discovery that caused a lot of alarm, I guess, in the government, and is sort of what kickstarted this whole program. So yeah, you can see this news article here. It's pretty cool. I believe this person on the left is John Brown, provincial entomologist. There's another picture of him later on. So yeah, they discovered this colony of rats. They were destroyed, but this really kickstarted the action that the Alberta government took towards eradicating rats, or setting up the province so that rats couldn't get in. And definitely the threat was viewed as a big part of it was the threat to the agricultural sector, but there was also a lot of concerns about public health at that time as well. So yeah, as you can see from these newspaper articles, these are all dating from the 40s, early 50s. Basically, yeah, there were a lot of health scares at that time for diseases like sylvatic plague, which can turn into bubonic plague, rabies. There had been a lot of rabies fears. That was, I think, a bit earlier, but it still would have kind of been in the public consciousness. So these were also like on the front. News articles like this would have been on the front page of newspapers around this time. So that really contributed to why the government took this so seriously. And in fact, the entomologists that discovered the rats in Alsace were looking for Richardson ground squirrels that were believed to carry sylvatic plague. So that, is why they were out there in the first place. And there was actually, in my documentary, we talk about it, a mink farmer had died, and it was believed that he had, contracted a disease from his minks, and, some sort of type of sylvatic plague or one of these diseases. And so again, that was a news item that people would have been aware of at that time. So yeah, July 22nd, 1950 is at least when the Herald reported this discovery. And then really quickly after that, so August 25th, 1950, there's a news article, the Alberta government declares rats official pests. So this is a really important sort of factor in the control program, because once rats were officially declared pests, it meant that Albertans had a legal obligation to remove them from their premises. So, it really gave the government a lot more power to sort of keep rats out and put pressure on, civilians to sort of do their part. So yeah, I believe this guy on the left here is that same, the guy in the picture before, John Brown. So there was a big part of it, is they were showing what rats actually looked like, making the public aware of, what they needed to look out for on their property. Yeah, so this is a really interesting document that comes from the provincial archives. It's not long after, right? It's only a month after the declaration of rats as pests, so September 27th, 1950. I'm not actually sure who sent this, but it's pretty fascinating because it says here, the department is confronted with the obvious fact that a large percentage of people in Alberta have never had an opportunity to see a rat, a fact that constitutes one of our prime difficulties. So really early on, the government acknowledged, like, we need to keep rats out. We need people to help us out with this, but people don't actually know what rats look like in Alberta because most people hadn't had contact with them. So they started bringing in stuffed rats, some live rats, and they would tour these around the province and show people. So you can see up in the top right, there's an image of these guys with a bunch of dead rats, showing them to some kids. And then down here, this is an interesting newspaper clipping. This is an exterminator, Napoleon Poulin, who we'll talk about in a second, and he's actually exporting dead rats to Alberta for display purposes. So this is always, continues to be a big part of the program, is that public outreach and awareness part. So yeah, in addition to these tours and it was something that was on the radio, there was also these pamphlets and educational sort of documents that were sent out to show people, what to look out for, how to deal with rats. And you can see on this pamphlet, it says, rats are pests. They are a threat to agriculture, home, health, and industry. So it was very much, those are kind of the areas that we're focused on, the economy and also public health. Yeah, Megan shared some of these. This is definitely for me one of the really fascinating parts of this program, are these incredible posters that they put out. If anybody listening has any of these or other ones, I'd love to find them. I'm really hoping to archive as much of this stuff as possible because, unfortunately, some of these are just online images, and I don't know if there are hard copies anywhere still in existence of some of them. But, they're pretty amazing, and they definitely reflect that Cold War period that a lot of this stuff was happening, right, in the early 50s. Here are some more. This one on the right, I believe, this is much later. I think it was the 90s, but these other ones definitely are from the early days of the program. So once, the rats showed up on the Alberta border, the establishing the Pest Act was one of the first big sort of things the government did to take action, but they were still confronted by the fact that there were a lot of rats suddenly sort of establishing themselves along that border. So the way they dealt with it is they hired an exterminator from Manitoba named Napoleon Poulin, who I'm not exactly sure how he managed to get involved with the program, but apparently he even worked on speculation. He was so confident that he could remove the rats that he wouldn't take payment until he had completed the job. So he was hired by the government, and I think it was over a period of maybe about 18 months or something. He had a big crew, and they basically, took no prisoners. The man who killed 10 million rats. So he did the sort of initial cleanup of that border zone. You can see here, there's a photo. This is a pretty iconic photo as well, this massive pile of rats with his crew. So yeah, once Napoleon Poulin had kind of cleaned up the border, that kind of established the template for, the rat control program in terms of monitoring that Alberta-Saskatchewan border and, really trying to keep that rat free. And that, in a lot of ways is still similar to what, how the program operates now. Karen obviously can talk a lot more about that. But, once that happened, you can see in this graph here, right? So in the mid 50s, late 50s, they were, getting over 600 infestations a year at some points, and that just drops dramatically, right? And even, from 1980 onward, it drops even more to the point where, now there might be 1 or 2 infestations per year. So it's quite amazing accomplishment, and yeah, definitely a fascinating origin story. Yeah, that's all I have. If you are interested in watching my documentary, it's called Living Without Menace, and it's available CBC Gem. And yeah, if you have any rat patrol related stories or memorabilia or anything like that, I'd really love to hear from you. So thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ted. That was wonderful. So we will hold the questions until the end. And I understand that we're also having some other small technical difficulties and our chat is not working properly. We're a little rusty on our webinars, folks. So thanks so much for your patience and for bearing with us. So just put any comments or questions or ponderings in the Q&A and we will address them that way. So if you have anything that you'd like us to know, please put it in the Q&A and we will deal with stuff as it comes in. So thanks. So we're going to switch over now. Next up, we have Karen Wickerson. So she is our rat and pest specialist with Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation. And Karen has worked with the government of Alberta for 12 years, first as a post-mortem tech at the Airdrie Ag Pathology Lab, where she was there for 7 years, and then as the rat and pest specialist for the province for the past 4 years. Karen is a registered veterinary technologist, having worked in a rural and mixed animal veterinary clinic for the first 7 years of her veterinary career. When she graduated from the animal health tech program at Olds College, she never thought her love of working with animals would lead her to running the rat control program for the province. Isn't it fascinating, the twists and turns that our careers take us on? But I bet you probably are quite enjoying your role now, and we sure love working with Karen. So I'm going to hand it over to you now. Thanks so much, Karen.
Great. Thanks, Megan. I've shared my screen. I assume you can see it.
Looks great.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for that introduction, Megan. I can't tell you how excited I am for the launch of this campaign. I've been in this role for almost 5 years now, and launching a province-wide campaign to promote the rat control program has definitely been one of my goals in this position. So for my portion of the forum, I'm going to talk about what the current program looks like. And I apologize, I'm going to just touch on, cover a few things that Ted talked about as well. I'm often asked why our program has been successful at preventing rats from permanently establishing in the province. My answer often is because we saw them coming and we were prepared. In my opinion, these are the 3 main reasons on this slide that the program has succeeded. We had the legislation in place to make rats a pest. And when they arrived at the border, we were able to do that. I'll touch on this in the next slide as well. The climate and geography of our province are not conducive to rats surviving over winter. And then again, as Ted touched on, the government made it a priority to educate Albertans on why we do not want rats. When the program first started in 1950, they launched that awareness campaign, including the posters, segments on Call of the Land, the radio show, and attended fairs and 4-H meetings to educate people on the destructiveness of rats. When rats were first discovered at the Alberta-Saskatchewan border, the government was very proactive and, as we have said, declared them a pest and required every Albertan to control rats if they have them on their property. So we are all still to this day responsible for controlling rats if we have them on our property. Really, this was the birth of the rat control program. The government knew that the spread of rats into the province would cause large damages to agriculture, infrastructure, and presented a risk of disease to humans and animals. The geography, as I first mentioned, has been very supportive to keeping rats out of Alberta. It's cold to the north. They could not survive winter. Mountains to the west. Rats cannot travel over mountains. And Montana to the south is fairly sparsely populated with farms, and they are spread out. So it really was the biggest threat was overland migration of rats from Saskatchewan. When the government decided to create a program to control rats, they looked at the area where the rats were at highest risk of entering the province and created the rat control zone. So that's that yellow strip along the eastern part of the border there. The purpose of the rat control zone was to prevent the establishment of rats by actively controlling them in this area, so eradicating the infestations, and remove any harborages or anywhere they would want to live and food sources. So the rat control zone, it still exists today, and it runs from Cold Lake all the way down to the Montana border. So I think that's around 520 kilometers. And it's about the first 3 ranges westward from the border. So that's about 30 kilometers into Alberta. And we still do inspections along the border there. It's in the first range mainly now, and we do those twice a year. I always like to clarify what types of rats make their way into Alberta. Certainly we've discussed the Norway rat already, but it really is the Norway rat and the roof rat that we are concerned about. So historically, we've patrolled the border for the Norway rat. We do see Norway rats hitch rides on vehicles and transports from out of province as well. And as far as distinguishing features of the Norway rat, it has that brown coloring with the longer body and a shorter tail. And it does have kind of smaller ears closer to the body as it is a burrowing animal. Now the roof rat, we mainly see these come from BC. BC does have a population of Norway rats as well, but we seem to get kind of a mix of both from them that hitchhike on vehicles. The roof rat itself is dark gray to black coloring, and it has a tail that when extended around to the front of the head is longer than the body. They also have kind of those larger ears because they're real climbers. So it's very easy to distinguish them, say, from a Norway rat, because if you pull the ears forward, they will cover the eyes. And these guys historically have been most commonly found in seaports. But as I mentioned, they do live in the interior of BC as well. Now I'll talk a bit about the areas in the province where we are at high risk for rats or could have infestations. As we have mentioned, the program was started to focus on agricultural settings because the government wanted to prevent the spread of rats into Alberta and preventing agricultural losses. These photos here are actually from the rat control zone. So you can see how the Norway rats have burrowed into the ground to chew through the floors of these granaries and access the grain that is stored in them. So rats can survive fairly easily over winter under these structures as they have shelter and they also have a food source. Fortunately, farming practices have modernized, and grain for human and animal consumption is now stored in granaries that have cement bottoms or are elevated off the ground. You can also see the bales stored feed on the left there. Rats have burrowed holes into them. So a rat can survive over winter in these bales as they have shelter and a source of food as well. Hitchhikers, I've mentioned them. So these are the majority of the confirmed rat reports we receive. Single rats hitch rides on vehicles, mainly from the interior of BC. So that area from Salmon Arm all the way down to the border does have a large rat population of Norway and roof rats. And they also do hitch rides on holiday trailers as well. So people do unknowingly bring them back from their holidays. When you lift up the hood of your vehicle, quite often you will see nesting material in and around the battery or possibly an air vent, as that photo in the top left illustrates. Rats can also chew through wires in vehicles, and that's the bottom photo there. So they can really cause a lot of damage in a vehicle. The guy at the top right there, he was actually found after some people had returned from a holiday in BC, and they took their vehicle into a garage. And when the technician opened the hood of the car, he was there. So you can imagine it's a long, hot, harrowing drive back from BC if you're riding in the engine of a vehicle. So quite often they do not survive the journey or die quickly after they arrive here. So it's always wise, if you're traveling to BC, lift up the hood of your car and check your holiday trailer when you come back from a holiday there. Some other high-risk areas in the province for rat infestations are landfills and recycling facilities. These are complex environments to control rats in, as they have a constant source of food and can easily go undetected. We have had infestations in these types of facilities in the past. If product is brought into these facilities from out of province, they are at high risk of possibly introducing rats. People may remember the Medicine Hat infestation that occurred in 2012. We were able to trace the source of the rats from product that was brought in from Saskatchewan to the landfill. It took 2 years, but we were able to eradicate the infestation. Now, this is kind of one of my favorite parts of talking about the program, is that if you've lived in Alberta for most of your life, you may have never seen a rat. So identifying one may be difficult for you. Muskrats here, as this photo illustrates, they're the #1 critter mistaken for a rat in Alberta. They are a larger rodent. They have a long tail. So, they can easily be mistaken for a rat. Muskrats can frequently be seen traveling along the side of a road, quite a distance from water. And this is where people frequently see them and send us photos, and it's often during the day. It is unusual to see a rat during the day, as they are nocturnal and are mainly active at night. And these are some of the other critters that we receive reports that are often mistaken for rats. So the mouse, I find that people who are coming to Alberta from other parts of the world, they may live with rats and may have never seen a mouse. So quite often, if they move into a home and they discover they have critters living in it, they report them to us as rats, but really they're mice. So that is a big part of our education. The big part of our job is education, teaching people the difference between rats and mice. The bushy-tailed wood rat, pack rat there in the middle, these guys, they are native to Alberta. They live in the foothills, and they're really good at hitchhiking rides as well, either in your vehicles or in holiday trailers, and highly destructive. They'll chew wires as well. The vole up in the top right corner, these guys, again, native. They are quite often found when the snow melts in the spring and people discover they have holes in their lawn, small holes, and it's usually these guys. They burrow, so they have ears that are quite close to the body, and they have a short tail as well, about the size of a mouse. The northern pocket gopher, these guys are a burrowing animal too, a bit larger than the vole. They have a short tail, big claws and teeth. Quite often, dogs and cats kill them and bring them home to their owners. And then tree squirrels, the guy in the bottom left-hand corner is a black squirrel, which is not native to Alberta. These guys, for some reason, the past couple spring, summers, have lost the hair on their tail for some reason, and people think that they're a rat and report them to us. The next couple slides contain data on the reporting we receive in the program. The graph on the left there breaks down the percentages of the different critters that reported to us as rats that was for 2023. You can see muskrats, they make up the largest portion at 35%, and our confirmed rats are about 5% of our total reports. And the graph on the right just illustrates the amount of reports we receive in the blue compared to the amount that are actually the confirmed rats in the red. So you can see how most of the rat reports we do receive are not rats. I wanted to include this slide as I think it illustrates how important it is that the public reports to us. The dark blue shows our total number of reports again, and the gray shows the total from the public. We do receive reports from bylaw and the ag field bin from the rural municipalities, and that usually is reports they've received from the public, but majority of the reports we receive are from the public directly. And this last slide here just illustrates the number of infestations. Ted had something similar. So you can see in the 50s, we were battling over 600 infestations per year, and it has gradually declined to generally between 0 and 5 infestations per year. And in Alberta, we consider an infestation 2 rats or more. So sometimes, people do report to us that people have pet rats. So that can be included as an infestation. And so if a person only has 2 rats, that's an infestation. I am often contacted by media to comment on rat situations in other jurisdictions. Rats have been in the news a lot. There are a lot of cities struggling, Ottawa, Toronto, New York, with rat populations. And they always ask me, oh, what can these jurisdictions do? And I just have to say, really, our situation is unique because we started the program before rats were permanently established. So unfortunately, I don't always impart the information that they want to hear, a definitive what they can do, a plan. But yeah, I just really explain what our situation here is in Alberta. And for the first time in the 70 years of the program, there is an assistant, Garrett Gerlitz. He joined our team in June, and he's been a great addition. Having another person as part of the rat control program is really going to increase our capacity of the program. We're going to be able to focus more on outreach and public education. And I just want to give a shout out to Darren Beckett there in the middle. We were out at the County of Vermilion River a couple weeks ago. Darren is the assistant agricultural fieldman, and he graciously took us out and did some rat inspections so that we could film some footage of what that looks like. So thank you, Darren. I'm always asked about our rat-free status. How can we say that we are rat-free when rats do get into the province? And all I can say is, yeah, they do get in. There's no way I can inspect every vehicle or transport that comes into the province, but we do have a program when they get here to make sure that they don't establish. And we really thanks of this is due to the diligence of Albertans. I talk to many Albertans. They contact us and say, my friend told me that I had to report a rat because I think I saw a rat. And so certainly Albertans are very proud of the fact that we don't have rats. And for my last slide, just as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I'm really excited to have this collaboration with Alberta Invasive Species Council. So many new people have moved to Alberta from across Canada and the world, and they may not know that we have a program and that we do not allow rats. So I think the timing is perfect to launch this campaign. We're going to reach a wider audience across Alberta than we have in the past with it. So I just want to say thank you to the team at Alberta Invasive Species Council, Megan and Paige. It's been great working with you on this, and I'm excited to promote this with you. And that's all I had.
Awesome. Karen, that's great. We are just as excited as you are. And I think like your story is so great. It's so great to talk about a success story. So often in this world, we really don't get that opportunity. And it's such a wonderful thing to do. And it really speaks to the value of prevention. And I think we should talk a lot more about that. So it's a wonderful thing, and we're super excited as well. So there's a lot of great comments coming into the Q&A. Just a reminder to all the attendees, if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer box. But we are going to save those questions till the very end, and we're going to move along. And next up, we have Lisa Sulz, who is the agricultural supervisor at Cypress County. Lisa is known for her leadership as an agricultural management and pest control, including invasive plants and rats. As a pest control officer in her role, she was actively involved in addressing the rat infestation in Medicine Hat in 2014, and I'm sure everybody heard about that. There was a lot of news and publicity about that infestation. And she was actively involved in addressing that. And she worked to mitigate the spread and impact of the pests in the area. And Lisa's an absolute trooper. She's a little bit under the weather. I know there's a lot of germs going around this time of year, but she's here to talk to us about her experiences with boots on the ground, doing rat inspections and kind of really understanding what happens within the rat control zone in southeastern Alberta. So Lisa, over to you. Paige is going to bring up those slides because we are, again, there are some technical sometimes technology works really well for us, and when it does, it's great, and other times it doesn't, but we're going to get that loaded up. Just going to, there we go. And Lisa, just prompt us when you would like those slides changed. Page, that looks perfect. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and
Yep. Perfect, thanks. Sorry, my voice is a bit scratchy here and stuff today, so I'll try and get through this. Yeah, so I'm Lisa. I'm the Ag Supervisor at Cypress County, and I'm a pest control officer as well. And there's 2 other pest control officers in the county, Braden and Kennedy. So we all kind of work at rat inspections and that sort of thing along the Saskatchewan border. So I'll just kind of talk a little bit about that. Paige, or whoever, next slide. Perfect, thank you. So the rat control zone, Karen has of course touched on this as well, and same map I see. So it's about 18 miles wide along Alberta's eastern border with Saskatchewan and 380 miles long. There's 6 municipalities that are responsible for rat control in this area. And in the event that, some need help, then other PCOs will come in and give a hand or whatever for different, if it's infestations or training or that sort of thing. So next slide. So here's a picture of the Norway rat. So this just kind of gives an idea of how to identify one. So it's the largest and the most adaptable. It's brown and grayish and kind of a white or light gray underneath. He's 12 to 18 inches long from the nose to the end of the tail, and the tail will be shorter than the head and the body. He's thicker and heavier than other species. Tail is hairless, but has a well-defined hairline ridge and tapers at the end. They got shiny, small black eyes, and their ears are short, and the ears will not cover the eyes if they're pulled forward. A blunt nose, small, delicate pink feet, and their droppings are 3/4 of an inch long with rounded ends. So that's kind of how you would identify a rat, comparing it to, a Norway rat compared to a roof rat, I guess, typically, and pock gophers and stuff like that. Next slide. So mistaken identities, we will often get calls for identifying a rat. People are upset or wondering what the heck the dog's brought up or something like that. So often we find that it's a pocket gopher, so a short stubby tail. Muskrats are also very common, and during their migration kind of thing. So certain times of the year we'll get a lot of calls, and they're often the muskrat. We've had fancy rats, so that's kind of, I guess, something that people might feed their snakes if they have. There's been a few reports of those over the years. The bottom, there's the roof rat there, so smaller body and a very long tail. The mouse, so it's hard to see from a photo, kind of like this, like if there's no pencil or something in there to kind of indicate the size of the rodent. So we get those, and we've even had people worried about Richardson's ground squirrels in their yards. So that was interesting. Next slide. So rats need food, water, and shelter to survive. Again, they will survive and they will eat spilled grain, green field feed bales. They'll live in silage pits and dump sites and landfills, anything that there would be anything to eat and to stay alive and have water. So like there's snow here in some photos, so that helps them. And then any kind of shelter, they need some kind of shelter to survive our winters, of course, if there's food and water also to go with. So next slide. So rat inspections for us, we do spring and fall rat inspections, and we do ours in range 1, so 6 miles along the Saskatchewan border. Rats haven't been found in Cypress County for many, many years along the border. So that kind of explains why we only do range 1, even though the rat control zone is range 1, 2, and 3. Other municipalities, though, to the north may inspect 2 or all 3 ranges, kind of depends on the risk and proximity to infestations and that sort of thing going on in Saskatchewan. We inspect all potential rat habitats, so this could change slightly from year to year, depends on residences and abandoned yards and granaries and all that kind of thing. So if it's a wooden bottom, buildings or bins, then the rats will and can chew through those. So we would inspect those. It's nice to see now with the elevated grain bins and concrete floor. So that kind of discourages rats too. So that's helpful. And yeah, so we would walk around all the bale stacks and that sort of thing. We'd look for holes. That'll be in another slide here too. Just different tracks and trails that they would leave and that sort of thing, looking for all these signs that would potentially, be a rat type thing. So signs of rats. So during the inspections, not infestations, they may leave runways, so well-beaten trails approximately 2 inches wide from the nest to a food or water source. These can be found under bales or planks, granaries, wood, machinery, that sort of thing. So that first picture will you can see that there's a track there going from the granary to a little pile of wood. Burrows, their entrance holes in the ground or in bales are 2 to 3 inches round and clean of debris, so they don't leave a mess. Like on that top photo, it's very, very round hole and a nice clean hole. So that's a very good indication of a rat. There's smudges where oily hair and dirt has been collected, or it will stain the walls and surfaces and that sort of thing if they're running back and forth and their hair is touching surfaces. Okay. So other signs of rats. So this was not in Cypress County, but it was an infestation. So there was maggots in this hole. So that indicated to us that there was dead rodents under that granary. So that was kind of gross. The droppings here, they've obviously eaten some of our bait. So 3/4 of an inch long, blunt, shiny black, which is kind of hard to see now, but blue. So if he ate that, he's not going to survive that. So, and there's about 25,000 droppings a year. So that's a very good sign too. If there's that many, you're gonna, probably see signs of scat somewhere too. So other signs are their characteristic chewing and gnawing habits. They will take chunks out of bait instead of a mouse, which would kind of nibble. So it would be quite obvious if you know what you're kind of looking for with that. Rats must chew continually to wear down their front teeth that grow 2 to 4 inches a year. So they chew on anything like wood, concrete, the wiring in your vehicles, your homes, like all that sort of thing. They'll have holes in the walls or floors, again 2 to 3 inches in diameter, and can be larger depending on what material that is. And their tracks, so they got fine little feet and quite obvious, like they're quite a bit bigger than a mouse track is indicated in that graphic there. So, City of Medicine Hat. So the first infestation, in August of 2011, there had been reports of rats in a hamlet called Vinerville. So that is about 1 mile from the landfill. So a letter was sent to all those residents stating that rats are a pest under the Ag Pest Act, and that there would be an intent to use bait in bait stations to destroy them. In November, a rat was found in the metal pile in the landfill, and 2 more rats were found in that pile in February. So soil was removed, and they continued to bait there and monitor. By the end of July 2012, 16 rats have been identified in that localized area, and pest control officers knew that there must be a source of rats close by that they haven't found yet. So after a couple attempts of night watch, on August 8th, 2012, rats were finally found at the landfill. So PCOs from the rat control zone and other ag fieldmen came to help, and many of them had more experience than the people in Cypress County at the time. And the province, the city, the county, and others were all involved in this. There was 155 known rats that were killed because they would have been picked up and gathered kind of thing. But there would have been many more that would have died underground as well. Bait stations were left and monitored at the landfill afterwards, and the rat control eradication team was recognized for their work in eradicating the rats, as shown in that picture there. So team together, everyone achieves whatever it says there. I can't even read it. Anyway, okay, next slide. I'm having a hard time seeing this, sorry. So in 2014, in February to April, there had been several single rat sightings in the county surrounding the landfill. So we investigated each one, of course, and that led to the suspicion of rats in the landfill once again. So the rats were found as a result of monitoring and people being aware of the rat, showing that it was working, that people were taking the proper steps to keep Alberta rat-free by reporting these single sightings, whether they were rats or other rodents, but they were single sightings of the Norway rat for the most part. So April 1st, many rats were spotted at the city landfill while staff from the province and the county inspected at 11 p.m. So that was very eye-opening. I was one of them. We went at 11 o'clock and it didn't take long. It was dead calm, very dark, kind of full moon, and then you could hear them. So when you could kind of find then where they were, and then we could see them running around there. So April 2nd, intense baiting in the landfill began where the rats were found, and monitoring the bait stations and picking up dead rats over several weeks afterwards occurred. And then a private company was hired for at least a year afterwards to check properties in the surrounding area and monitor bait stations within a 3-mile radius of the landfill. Next slide. So this is just a photo kind of what we were dealing with. There's people, we were climbing through the garbage in the working face kind of thing and baiting, and I don't have a cursor here or anything to show you. So I think the next slide will have a better picture. We used all kinds of, so on the left, there's a tire bait station. So all the tire bait stations and the proper like tier 1 bait station, it's really hard to see. It's right beside the brick down at the bottom. All those bait stations were marked with a stake and flagging tape and a number. So the landfill, their staff had like a really intense spreadsheet that they had all the bait stations marked down, and then they kept track of like when they were baited and what they found and that sort of thing. So, and that the number on that stake says 81. So there was a lot. So we used tire bait stations there. We used tier 1 bait stations, the express bait station. And then also we would use, like, if there was pipe sticking out of the ground and stuff like that, we would put bait in those as well. Yeah, so pretty intense there for a while. Next slide, please. So during that infestation in 2014, the assistant deputy minister had visited the landfill also. And what is this? Oh, the spreadsheet, yeah, with all their records and stuff. So, and there's another picture of a rat, short tail. Okay, next slide. So this is another example of a infestation. This was also within city limits, but not related to the landfill. We had a call in February 2014. People had seen some rats at a facility, a metal recycling facility. And upon inspection, they had mentioned that 4 rats had been killed, and one was killed while I was there, actually. So, yeah, and it was determined then that there was a couple old combines that were brought from Saskatchewan, and that was likely the source of the infestation and those rats. So there's a couple of old grain bins along the edge of the property as well, and those had provided a source of shelter and food, and it was winter, so there was snow all over the ground as well. So they kind of had everything there for a short-term stay, but they have been dealt with. So, okay, next slide. Oh, these are examples of some bait stations and some traps. There's blue bait up there on the top, like they're on stake, so a rat can't go in, or another rodent, and pull the block right out. They have to actually chew on it. Inside that one too, there's actually a T-Rex trap, so that's like a mouse trap, like, but for rats, of course, and then it would snap in there as well. There's some soft bait that little guy's chewing on, and yeah, other snap traps and different kinds of grain. There's a picture of a tire bait station. The express bait stations, they, all those things need to be labeled and that sort of thing too, with a poison and what kind it is. And then we've also used bales, like to put bait between and like underneath. And then of course there's flags indicating that those bales have been baited. So, okay, next slide. So for public awareness, we've got really good relationships, well, for the most part, with the residents in the rat control zone. So it's nice to kind of make those relationships and be able to inspect and have, bait brought right to them and that sort of thing. So that's been really positive. We've also had this particular tailgate wrap put on one of our trucks. So it's just kind of, letting people know that they should report any signs of Norway rats and wild boar in this case too. Years ago, there were these magnetic stickers for rat control that could go on the side of your truck when we were doing not infestations, but inspections. And yeah, we've done other social media posts and interviews and that sort of thing as well. So it's always a positive experience for us. Next slide. That's it. Yeah, so thanks to the public's vigilance, we're able to inspect all reports and to deal with them immediately, like to keep Alberta rat free. Like it's great. And now this new campaign of Rat on Rats is really exciting for us too, and for everybody. So yeah, the graphics are great. This one, is keep Alberta rat free too, and that's wonderful. So it's never been something I thought I'd ever be doing, but it's been a good experience, and I'm happy to be part of the rat control zone and working with Karen and now of course Megan and Paige too. You guys are great, so thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lisa. That was great. We get so many questions about what is the rat control zone? How does that even work? And I think you explained that beautifully. And I love those tailgates. I love them. They are literally driving billboards. They're so great. You're gonna have to get the new logo on there though. So we'll work with you on that. Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. So just we've got great questions coming in, but we're just going to hear from Chuck here real quick. Then we're going to bring all of our speakers back and go from there. So next up, we squeezed Chuck into the agenda last minute after Chuck is a dear colleague and friend, and we were chatting at an invasive species conference. Chuck is our invasive species reporting app guy. He's the EdMaps guy. If you haven't heard about EdMaps, we should talk about EdMaps. Let's chat offline. But Chuck is here not talking about EdMaps or invasive species reporting, but rather just as his experience living with rats. And Chuck comes to us from the state of Georgia. And are you in a big city? Where specifically are you located, Chuck? Give us some of that, background. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I live in South Georgia, about an hour from the Florida line. So pretty small town, farming community, absolutely. So I learned something in putting this presentation together, that always take more pictures than you think you will ever need, because I didn't have pictures of some of the stuff that I wish I had had pictures of to show y'all a little bit better about some of the things I've personally dealt with some rats and more recently some mice, but maybe some little rats as well. So I am the director of the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health at the University of Georgia. But my presentation today has nothing to do with my day job. I do occasionally get outside and get to deal with some invasive species. This is me learning how to capture a Burmese python, but usually I spend more of my time behind a desk and behind a webcam. So honestly, in the United States, rats are so common that we normally don't think of them when we think about invasive species. And also because they're mostly more of an urban problem. And so it just it's not something that because they're everywhere. Yeah, they're non-native. Yes, they're definitely an invasive species, but we're so used to them that they're not something we think about very much. So this is really in my opinion, the most impressive story. About 2004, I moved into a house. I've learned since then that it's really nice to have a house that is on a slab, because you don't have to worry about a crawl space and things coming up through the crawl space. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. But in my backyard of my house, I had a little woodworking shop, and it was back in the back of the property. And I moved in, got really excited I was going to be able to do some woodworking, and then it turned out that I had a couple of kids over a couple of 3 or 4 years, and I ended up not going out to the shop very often. Well, what happens when you have a building like this and you don't go out there very often, then things can get in it and you don't notice it as often. So this shop, and this is a picture I pulled off the internet to kind of explain it, because unfortunately I have no pictures of inside of this shop, probably because of the rat issues I dealt with. But the shop had an overhang, and I stored stuff up there, and One day I remember going in there and there was like styrofoam. And this is, what I imagine ended up being there was all these rats. And I had both Norway rats and roof rats when I started capturing them and all. I found both kinds, and a whole lot of their droppings. It ended up that they were coming in to the shop from, they had chewed through these sides of the window air conditioner that was in there. So they had figured out how to get into the shop by chewing through this. Now, usually critters get in somewhere because they're looking for food. Well, there was no food inside this shop. So what they did was they found their own food. So I had fire ant bait. It was a shaker where there were pellets that you shook on fire ant mounds. I had fire ants real bad at this house too. And one day I came in there and they had chewed into the bottom of this fire ant bait and were eating the fire ant bait. What that caused the rats to do, in some ways, I think it made them into more super rats. But they chewed in, they ate that. Another time, and I was going to say this at the beginning, but my slides were not in the order I was thinking they were. I had one of these old Coleman coolers, and they were up in the rafters of the shop. And I came in there one day, and there was like styrofoam on the ground, and I could not figure out where the styrofoam had come from, where the rats had chewed into the side of the cooler. And no lie, this was the styrofoam was the insulation from the cooler, and they had chewed into it. And so had a long battle with trying to get this cleaned up, get all the droppings out of it, get all of that cleaned up. I had a pretty extensive infestation by the time it was all said and done. But if you look closely at the shop over here on the left-hand side, there was a lumber room that I built onto the back of the shop. Can't believe I don't have any pictures better than this of that lumber room, but I built this lumber room. My grandfather passed away. He was a woodworker. We had a bunch of wood and needed a place to store it. And so that lumber room that was kind of back in the back of the shop over here was stacked floor to ceiling with lumber. So when I moved out of this house and we pulled the last piece of lumber out of that lumber room, 2 rats scurried away. So even after everything I had done, all the trapping, all the baits, everything I had done, even this fully stacked lumber room, they had still figured out how to way to survive in the back of that place. So that's my first story. That's the most impressive story. That it was a long-term battle that went on. I know some of these are mice pictures. I was trying to use ChatGPT to make the presentation more interesting. So the next story I had shared with Megan was about, you always think about New York City being where the rats are worse, but it turns out Washington, D.C. is pretty bad with rats. And so me and the family in 2018 went to Washington, D.C. And what shocked us was when we were walking around at night, how many rats you would just see. They were like squirrels in the streets, walking around, coming in and out of the trash cans and everything else. And I'll see if this works, but I found this video that somebody had taken somewhere else of these huge rats on the street. And this is literally what it was like walking around at night in the areas where, we were kind of alone on the streets, and there were rats just digging into things along the way. So just a side note, just how these things can just show up everywhere. This was interesting, and it was kind of a different kind of rat, still a rat, probably not one y'all were going to have, but during 2020, when we were kind of locked down and didn't have a lot to do, you noticed the above ground pool that we put on the patio to kind of keep the kids happy. Our cat started going crazy. and we could not figure out what in the world was going on. I mean, she was trying her best to get our attention and explain to us that there was something going on, and there was something back behind this thing, and evidently this is my wife that captured it, and the cat saw it going. And so if you look closely, but in both of these pictures, you can see an eye right in here. And then, maybe a better picture of it here. This thing, it didn't look like a rat. It didn't look like anything that I'd ever seen before. But it decided, and it's hard to tell from these pictures, but it decided to get behind the storage box and just stay there. And it turns out that after talking to some people, that it's a hispid cotton rat. Evidently, they're pretty common, and they're kind of fat, and they have a more distinctive face. And so, it was more of just, it was 2020. We were all kind of stuck at home, and the cat starts going crazy. And hey, what in the world is this? All right, so my final story, and then we can move on to more things for the experts on this. But when we moved into this other house, it was not on a crawl space. It was on it was not on a slab. It was on a crawl space. So there was space up underneath the house. Still had the cat that should be guarding us from rats and mice and everything else. And this is just the entryway into the crawl space up underneath the house. But if you notice, there's these vents here, and what I think is happening, because we have had some mice issues, and we've had some rat issues as well, is that they're able to get in underneath the house, either under the ground, or they're getting in through the vents. And so our tub has this surround around it, and it's got the jets, and so in order to access those, there's doors on the tub surround. And so we kept getting, and luckily all we ever saw were little mice, but we've caught some bigger ones getting in the house, and some droppings in the bathroom, and we could not figure out how in the world they were doing this. Well, the best I figured out, and I've solved the problem of them getting in the house now, is that they were able to push these doors open. And so the mice in this case were getting into the house, they were pushing the door open, and they were getting up underneath the tub, and they were coming from where the drain, there was a hole in the subfloor where the drain comes up. And so they were coming up through that hole and then able to push these doors open in order to get into the house. So my first solution was, and if you see right here, was I put magnetic latches on these doors, like 70-pound magnetic latches. Anybody that has those old stereos, remember those magnetic latches. And I said, okay, this will keep them from being able to open the doors. So we did that and fixed that, did a lot of work up underneath the house, trying to seal the area up. Took, and I think I've got a picture here. Yeah, took and wrapped steel wool around the pipe. Steel wool was supposed to be a deterrent that would keep them from coming in. Also, because it was that plywood, it was hard to always see if there were droppings on it because of the coloration of it. So I took and put white duct tape down, so it'd be very clear if there were droppings there after we vacuumed everything out and cleaned it up from where we had stuff. And then have set traps and monitor the traps, routinely to make sure we don't get mice. Well, and if you notice, I'll show you in the next slide, but since Megan asked me to do this presentation, and also because I think it's been very dry in South Georgia since in the month of October, I don't think it rained at all. I think we've captured one. We've actually captured two small mice in traps up underneath the house, and I think it's because they're looking for sources of water. And so, another deterrent are these electrical things that are supposed to maybe help. So we've also got one of those in up underneath the tub, and we're still getting mice to come in. This one was a little bit larger. I don't know if this still is categorized as a mouse or if it's a small rat. I'll have to let the experts tell y'all that. But it has been very interesting that in the few weeks since they asked to do this presentation, I actually had pictures because of that. So I just want to leave you with, keep them out. It's well worth it. They figure out how to get anywhere. They're a lot smarter than we give them credit to be, and they can get really big. This is a colleague of mine at Texas A&M with some of the control work that they've done, and they get really big and they're really nasty, and it does, it doesn't matter if you have the easy food source. It doesn't matter. They find ways. The house can be as clean as they can be. You can use the detergents, the peppermint oil. We have tried everything and still managed to get them in occasionally. So yeah, thanks for listening. There's my contact information, but this was more of, hey, here's some interesting stories about rats than anything else. So thank y'all.
Love that. Thank you so much. Wow, that is just so important for us to understand, what the rest of the world is literally dealing with. And when we were chatting, you kind of likened it to I was looking for photos, folks, of Canada thistle, which, as Albertans know, is the most common weed that we have everywhere. We didn't have any photos of it. And we have a robust photo library, and we have no photos of Canada thistle because it's just so common. And Chuck, you basically kind of suggested the same thing. Like we're dealing with them all the time, and they're just everywhere, and it is what it is. So it's good for us to kind of compare that and understand that. So thank you so much, Chuck. So we're going to jump into our panel. I know we're a little bit over time, but this is such good information. We always need a technical person on the team. So if our panelists all want to turn their videos back on, hopefully, I know that we're going to lose Ted here pretty quick, but we're going to start going through these questions. And folks, if you have to go, I know we're over time, but we'll be recording this if you're keen to listen. So the first question is from Kelly Cooley. Has a few questions here. So the first question is from Kelly Cooley. He's wondering why there is not, I need to turn some videos on here. I will work on that. So Kelly's wondering why there's not another zone running along Alberta's southeastern border with Montana. Is the risk of rats coming north from Montana into Alberta low because northeast Montana is largely unpopulated with few people, roads, and buildings? So maybe I'll give Karen that question to answer.
Yeah, I actually last week had a conversation with the vertebrate pest specialist for the Department of Montana Agriculture. And I asked him exactly how many rats they have in Montana. And he said very few, actually. There might be some in their larger cities, like Billings. But Billings is like 150,000. So, their cities are quite small compared to some of our larger cities. But yeah, he did say they had very few rats in the state.
And Lisa, do you have anything to add to that? Because you do border both Saskatchewan and Montana.
We don't find rats on the border at all, so I'm not sure it would be. And we have got so little population, like it's so sparse down there. I don't think there would be anything.
Okay, awesome. The next is a suggestion for awareness. It might be a government-supplied safety vest with a rat logo and information for weed inspectors to wear. And we could use those in areas with pests and start conversations between landowners and inspectors. So there's a couple folks that thought that would be a good idea. And a comment from Darlene that had a rat in a birdhouse in her garden in Kelowna. So Aaron asks, when do you consider a larger infestation eradicated? Is it after a certain amount of time of not finding any more at that location? So Karen, do you want to take the first stab at that?
Sure. Yeah, certainly. We monitor for consumption of bait or any activity in traps for, quite a period of time until we're, months after, really, until, we feel we feel confident. And then we continue monitoring, just not probably on a daily or weekly basis, but we do continue to keep monitoring. And certainly people who either live or work in the location, in constant contact with them. So they report to us if they see any activity.
And along those lines, thanks, Karen. Kelly Cooley has another question directed to Lisa, specifically about the landfill infestations and when were they considered eradicated?
Like I wasn't here for the first one, so like the second one though was like we did have a private company that came in and did monitoring and that sort of thing for, it was at least a year. It might have been even more than that after the fact. And when we weren't seeing any more signs or dead rodents or anything anywhere, then again too, we were confident that they were all gone.
Awesome. Another question from Darlene. Darlene asks that we were told rats don't have bladders, so they urinate on demand. Is that true? Is that a rat myth? I don't know. Anyway, any takers?
No, they do have bladders as well. Yeah. They do mark, like other animals do with their urine.
They do.
Yeah.
Okay. Kelly Cooley provided some other examples of rat control programs. Wayne from Manitoba, hi Wayne, is interested in how the rat control program has managed to maintain funding over 50 years, which I think is which is incredible because we do see resources and funding for these programs ebb and flow constantly, and it is probably one of the biggest barriers to success is that continued and maintained support. So we asked, was there ever a time, say during government cutbacks, that the program was in jeopardy?
No. The rat control program is a real high priority for the government, so they do invest in it. The program has 2 full-time employees directly with the government, myself and Garrett. And then we do provide funding to the municipalities in the rat control zone to carry out the inspections and respond to infestations if they do occur. And going back to the Agricultural Pests Act, where it states that rats are a pest, people must control them. The municipalities are required to oversee infestation response or control of rats if they do have them in their municipality. And certainly we do provide funding, if there is an infestation, assistance with that. So, we get a really big return for the investment we put into the rat control program.
Thanks, Karen. Ted, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, what's kind of amazing too is that at least historically, like Alberta has spent way, way less than pretty much anywhere else, right? Like, I think maybe people assume that we have like a massive budget for the rat control program, but like Saskatchewan spends way more than us. I can only imagine how much BC spends. So the ability to like keep them out actually makes it way, way more economical. Because like those other provinces and places, where rats are a big problem. I mean, yeah, it's like a black hole probably. Like you could throw who knows how much money at it, but yeah, the ability to kind of like keep it where it is, right, and spend on prevention as opposed to actually like actively, getting rid of all these pests, like makes it way cheaper. So
it's easy to justify, I guess. Hey, yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add? Okay, we're gonna move along. So yeah, great. Exactly. The prevention, like, costs money, but it costs way less than dealing with the infestations. Like it's a no-brainer. I wish we need to talk about that more for sure. The next question is live African soft-furred rats are sometimes kept and sold in pet stores as reptile feeders. What makes these rats less likely to invade and establish in Alberta versus the Norway and roof rats?
So the African soft fur rats, not sure how they got their name with rat in it, but they're actually from the mouse family. So if you look at them, they are smaller than, say, a Norway rat or roof rat. They look like a gerbil. They're kind of the shape of a gerbil, and they are certainly raised for feeding rats, for reptiles and snakes. So they are not a rat that we are concerned of, because they are technically part of the mouse family. It's just their name is misleading.
Okay, that's great to know. Yeah. Chelsea asked if there was any other animal mortality at the bait stations when controlling the rats.
So these bait stations are designed to keep non-target animals out. Certainly there can be mice. Mice are native to Alberta, and we are allowed to control them. And they are on the label for the type of bait that we use. So but the baits are designed to prevent poisoning of non-target animals.
So along the lines of the recycling facilities being a hotspot, so Jody asked, why do we continue to allow these items, the recycling materials we brought into Alberta from BC and Saskatchewan, if they're widely known to carry rats?
Yeah, that's a good question. Recycling is a big part of our economy. So certainly the government doesn't want to shut down the product coming in from out of province, as there are businesses here that rely on it. The legislation does fall under environment and protected areas. It is not part of agriculture. We don't oversee it.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Here's one from Melissa. Hi, Melissa. Has anybody looked into the spread of invasive species through rail transport, not just rats? I don't know. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on that? No? Okay. We definitely know that the rail transport is a problem. I think Lisa's looking for her mute button. Certainly with the spread of invasive plants, I think that is a major vector. Lisa, yeah, do you have anything to add?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it's ever been something that has been, thought of before. I'm sure it has. I'm sure they would come in. They had the opportunity, to hitch a ride from BC or somewhere, it's not out of the realm of possibilities, I'm sure, but I don't think we've, like in Cypress County, has ever had to deal with anything from a train. We get lots from trucks and stuff stopping, jumping off at stops or hotels or, things like that. I don't know about trains for sure.
I think it just speaks to the fact that there are all these different types of invasive species and all these different types of pathways. And it's just like, there's a lot to be mindful of and to be aware of. So I think certainly that's another vector of spread of all kinds of critters, not just rats, but weeds and I'm sure all kinds of other things as well. So there's probably a lot of work that we could do on that front. Okay, there's some people, so rats don't have gallbladders. Does that sound, so this is Leanna has suggested that might be where we thought about the bladder thing. There's some comments in here as well. I'm not sure that there are other questions. There are some kind of more administrative ones. So Bree wonders about if there's a social media page that they can share from or a place to get the logos to share. Bree, please reach out to myself or Paige. We will send an email out to all attendees with our contact information. We're working on a communications toolkit that will allow access to the logos, newsletter articles, social media posts, etc. In the meantime, please feel free to share our social media posts that we'll be putting out very soon. But just please get in touch with us, and we'll add you to the list of people to connect with, and we'll have that kind of nice package little thing to send out to you. And Ron is looking for Ted's info. We will also send out Ted's info because he's specifically looking for folks who have rat stories or images or have anything to add to the history of the rat control program. Ted, did you want to speak to that specifically, what you're after? And we will send that out in an email.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, one of the interesting things, I guess, about this program is that historically there haven't been, tons of people employed by the program. So, anybody, like definitely people who might have relatives that have worked on the program. Like I'm really, would love to get as much anecdotal evidence from people as possible. And, also any kinds of, people have images, or, you know, like I was showing those posters. I mean, a few of those posters are in the provincial archives, but like a lot of those posters, I don't have physical copies of them. I don't even know if physical copies really exist. So, you know, I would love to try to archive as much of that stuff as possible, because, you know, it is such a fascinating program, fascinating history, but, you know, that stuff is always at risk of disappearing pretty easily. So I'd love to try to, you know, accumulate as much physical media or whatever as possible, as well as, you know, people's anecdotal experience before it gets lost. So yeah, please reach out, and I'd love to chat with anybody that has any stories or can share anything.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ted. So I think that's all there is one last question. So Tamara asked, would the province ever allow pet rats if they were neutered?
I'll speak to that. Yeah, no, we do not allow pet rats at all, simply because we don't want people to get used to seeing rats. So if someone sees rats in a home, when they go out and walk down, say, downtown Calgary and see rats coming out of a dumpster, they may be less inclined to report them to us. So we just want to send the strong message that we have a zero tolerance for rats, and encourage people, Albertans, to support us in that and report rat sightings.
Awesome. Well, okay. Thanks so much, Karen. Thanks for that. So Kelly has there's a few other things in here that we'll kind of circle back with, but I think that wraps up all of the questions. And we sure appreciate everybody's patience with us with our technical difficulties today. You know, we're a bit rusty on our webinars, so thank you for your patience with that. I want to thank all of our panelists and presenters for contributing their information and their knowledge, sharing their knowledge with us today. I want to recognize that we could not have developed Rat on Rats without funding and a grant from the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, which is a partnership between the government of Alberta and the federal government. So we're incredibly grateful for that, and to continue to be able to kind of talk about the success story and to get the information out. So our call to action for all of you who are still with us is, again, to tell one person something that you learned here today. If you could do that, that would be really helpful. The call to action, again, is to Rat on Rats. Join the Rat Patrol and help keep Alberta rat-free. Stay tuned for more information. We will we'll be sending you, all of the attendees, links to the recordings and more information and contact information for folks on the line here today. So with that, I want to thank everyone again. We are over time. Thank you for joining us today, and Rat on Rats. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.